Hey class, I'm Mr. Thornton. You've got 15 days until May, and I'm going to help you succeed in your GCSEs. This lesson, physics equations. I know that learning those physics equations is something which quite a few people struggle with, so I wanted to do a specific video all about this. Now, of course, it used to be that you got given an equation sheet in the exam, a formula sheet which had all of the equations on there which you needed, and you just needed to pick the correct one. But unfortunately, those days are now gone. This was driven by government wanting to make the physics GCSE more demanding, making sure that people were really working hard to get those top grades. And taking away the formula sheet was a nice straightforward way to do it. They've also taken an extra step. They've increased the amount of the GCSE which needs you to know those formulas. It's gone from about 20% to 30%. Now, of course, this doesn't just make the GCSE physics more demanding for those very top students. It makes it more demanding for everyone. There is a much bigger chunk of your mark which is going to rely on you knowing what those equations are and how to use them. It also used to be that people who were doing the foundation tier didn't actually have to learn how to rearrange the equations, but now everyone needs to be able to rearrange the equations as well as recall the equations, as well as remember what they are. So this is something which you need to devote some time to. But here's the thing. In trying to make the physics GCSE more difficult, what they've actually done is give it a massive weak point. Because now that 30% of the mark, that's a minimum. On some of the exemplar material which I've seen from the exam boards, it's been as much as 45% of the mark. And that is to learn 18 equations and what to do with them. Really, if you set your mind to it, you could learn that inside a week. In fact, I suspect if most of you really tried, you could learn it in a weekend. It is a tiny bit of knowledge which you need to put a little bit of time into learning, and then you will be able to get a huge chunk of the marks. On some of the exemplars I've seen, for example, it's possible to get a grade 4 without knowing any physics at all except for what your equations are and how to use them. If you don't already know those equations, then you have a massive opportunity to hugely improve your physics mark. You're probably scraping a few marks already, even if you're doing really badly in physics. So learning those equations could put you grades ahead of where you are. Not just one grade, but a few grades ahead. And it's just a case of devoting a very small amount of time to learning them. You are going to have to sit down and learn them by rote, but they're relying on you. The exam board and Ofqual, the government, they're all relying on you not wanting to learn them. It's not that you can't, it's just that it's not the most pleasant thing to learn. But I'm going to help you through that. I've prepared some resources and I want to make sure that you learn those equations because it will make such a huge difference to you if you don't already know them. The first thing to do is make sure you can rearrange these equations. Now, I appreciate maths may not be your strong suit. I appreciate that you may look at the algebra in physics and feel that it works in a slightly different way to the algebra in maths, or just that it's presented in a way which you're not used to, and that can throw you off a little bit. So, in a previous video, I came up with a nice straightforward way to rearrange about 90% of the equations which you might need to work with. For the other 10%, I will cover those in a moment. But this technique, and there are only 2 steps to it, this technique is going to cover you for most of the rearrangements you need to do. If you click the card just up here in the top right, you'll be able to go to that video and learn how to do that. I've also put together a playlist for you to binge watch of short videos covering all of the 18 equations you need to know off by heart. They tell you what the equations mean, what the relevant units are for each of the values in those equations, and they show you every single rearrangement you need to be able to do. They're all covered in videos which are about 2.5 to 3 minutes long. So everything is in there. Again, if you click the card just up here to the top right, you can go straight to this playlist and have a look at those videos. The idea which I was coming up with was to give you something which was a bit more interesting and a bit more visually stimulating to look at as you were trying to learn these equations. Just work your way through it, keep coming back to it, and they will start to sink in, and you'll get to see all of the rearrangements. By the time you sit down in the exam, you'll know exactly how to rearrange every single one of those equations. I also recommend using flashcards for rote learning. Again, I've already got a video on this. If you click the card just up here, you'll be able to see that. Now, rote learning using flashcards is a really good way to hammer that information in. They're quite versatile. You can use them in a few different ways, as I discussed in that video. And as you're working through them, you will steadily get better and better and better at not just knowing what the equations are, but being able to pick out which equation you need for a particular circumstance. However, because this is such an important thing, I've also decided to make you a set of flashcards. I've released these on the Tiny Cards app, which is available for both iOS and Android, and there is a link down in the description to both the app on the Apple App Store and on Google Play, and also in the description there is a link to the set of cards for all 18 equations which I've already produced, and you can download those and use them on your phone for free. Again, work through this, get some practice, try and build it into those times when you're not doing something else, like when you're on the bus to school. It will make sure that you start to really remember this information. Maybe you're not going to learn every last equation perfectly, but if you can learn half of them, if you can learn 2/3 of them, then that stands you in a much better chance of being able to get really good marks on those GCSEs. So make yourself some flashcards or use the digital ones which I've produced, but use that system, go through it, and you will start to learn these equations. I know 18 seems like a lot, but it's not that much once you start going through it. Now, as I keep saying that there are 18 equations which you need to learn, some of you have probably been thinking, well, my teacher's told me that there are 20 equations. I've got a list of 22. I've got 23. What's going on? Don't worry. There aren't really that many equations. This is all down to a slightly weird choice by the exam boards. Let me give you an example to explain what I mean. If you're working out efficiency of a device and you know how much useful energy you get out of that device and you know what the total energy that you're putting into the device is, then efficiency is just the useful energy out divided by the total energy in. If you're dealing with the power of the device, which is really just how much energy it uses every second, then you can also do the useful power out divided by the total power in. Now, some exam boards have just presented that as one equation, but some exam boards have presented it as two separate equations. Really, it's just efficiency is useful out divided by total in both cases. But they're sort of trying to make it look like it's two equations when really it's just one equation. You've just got one thing to learn there. But some of your equation sheets might present that as two separate ones. It's just the same calculation. Sticking with power, there's an even stranger thing which has happened. Power is just the amount of energy you use per second, so it's just energy divided by time. However, sometimes physicists refer to energy as work done, particularly when we're talking about moving physical objects as opposed to power running an electrical device. So a lot of exam boards are stating the equation for power as work done divided by time, and then restating it as energy divided by time. Energy and work done are the same thing. So again, that is the same equation. They've doubled up on the equation. I'm not sure why they've decided to do this, but many of the exam boards have. In fact, I've even seen a stranger example, which is where one of the exam boards, not only do they have power is work done divided by time and power is energy divided by time, which remember are the same equation, but they've also got a rearranged form of this equation. Energy is power multiplied by time. But that's just the power is energy divided by time just rearranged. And you all have to be able to do the rearrangement anyway. That is an expectation which has come from government. So why on earth they've also got you to learn the rearranged one off by heart when just learn what the power is energy divided by time equation is and make sure you can rearrange it. It's a pretty simple rearrangement. I don't know why they've done this, but it does mean that there are less equations which you need to learn than you might initially think. So do have a look at the list and remember that you can cross off some of those because they're just duplicates of each other. So in summary, learning equations is most people's least favourite part of physics. I totally get it. I didn't particularly like learning the equations either, and I like physics. But it is now something which they're trying to put into the physics as a barrier to make it more difficult for you to achieve, but they've accidentally made it into an enormous weak spot in the physics. If you devote a little bit of time, if you knuckle down and learn those equations, then you can make a massive change to your physics grade. If you don't already know all the equations off by heart and how to rearrange them, then that should be your #1 priority. That is going to be worth more marks than learning anything else for physics. And I recommend you start doing that today if you haven't already started on doing it. Seriously, you will be amazed at the difference it can make to your physics grade if you learn them. Take a look at the mock exams, which I'm sure you've all done by now, and have a look at how many marks on those exam papers just came down to knowing what the equations were and how to use them. And remember, it's going to be more on the new specifications than it was on the old specifications. You now have the opportunity to really ace those physics exams, and all you've got to do is spend a little bit of time learning 18 little equations. I hope that video really helped you. If it did, it really helps my channel when you like, subscribe and share these videos. Let people know I'm going to succeed in my GCSE. All the links and info for this video are in the description, and please let me know what you thought in the comments or on Twitter at Mr. Thornton UK, or use the hashtag #SucceedInMyGCSE. There are loads more GCSE Science videos on my channel too. Here's another one which YouTube thinks you might find useful. You can click my picture just here to subscribe, click down there to check how well you understood with the Snap Quiz website and app, and you can click just here to get my revision guides. Good luck in your GCSEs everyone, and thanks very much for watching.